maybe we could start with just who everyone is, what your background is, and why you're here today. My name is Katie. I'm a data science manager at Reddit, and I am interested in the idea of an analytics peer review process because I have a number of analysts on my team. They're all kind of in an embedded structure within the company. They all work directly with partner teams, and I need them to have better context for what each other are working on and collaborate better. So I'm looking for ideas on ways to do that.
I'm Kaitlin. I organize these events with Locally Optimistic, but I also manage a team of 4 analysts, and likewise embedded, not a lot of context across what each team is working on, despite a lot of intersections in what they're working on. And then the added layer that a lot of our reporting goes out to our clients, and just making sure that we're maintaining a reasonable high level, not just of quality, but of consistency and formatting, and what is our analytical voice, fuzzy soft things as well, which are always fun to sort of coach folks on.
I'm very curious what you're doing around all that. We definitely have a lot of similar needs, I would say.
I guess just going across the grid, I'm next. I run a data platform at Indigo Agriculture. It looks like we have a pretty large contingent on, thanks to Akshay making us aware this was going on. But we maintain 2 self-service platforms, one through Looker, one through Snowflake. We support everything from precision ag specialists to, data scientists and all sorts of different use cases. So we're interested to see when we review all their code that goes through a centralized code base.
Yeah, hey, I'm a data and analytics manager at ShipStation, though it encompasses like 2 other companies now. And so as we're combining, we used to have a really robust code review, peer review process, but it's fallen apart as we've integrated new members. I did come here thinking that you were going to tell me what the answers were.
Sorry.
It's okay. But it's good to know that it's a real problem, and I feel validated in struggling with it.
Maybe we'll get to a solution.
Yeah.
I think I'm next, at least on my screen. So my name's Levi Davis. I'm an analyst at Indigo Ag. I do a lot of training and mentoring of new analysts, and so it seems to me like the peer review process is very important for this because, I want to, help people become independent, but at the same time, I need to make sure that they're following best practices and everything like that. So I think it's an important topic for me.
I'll go next. I'm Erin. I work at a company called Outshine. We are a digital marketing consultancy firm. So we build out and support infrastructure for a lot of different clients. And our data team is also kind of in its infancy stage, I would say. So before scaling up, we're trying to kind of deal with some of these pain points and arrive at a process that ensures some sort of consistency and quality across clients. So I'm with Zachary. I was hoping to get the answers here, but I think this will be a good discussion.
I can go next. Hi, my name is Baran. I'm working as a data analyst at Get Your Guide in Berlin. And in our company, data analysts are not writing any code that is under version control, but I'm trying to introduce it. So it's mostly on living in the notebooks. But now I'm trying to introduce a process for writing proper transformation jobs and putting them in GitHub. I'm also trying to onboard them for using GitHub and so on. So I want to understand what's the best way for this initial phase of meeting with the pull request for the first time.
Hey, I'm Nathan. I'm a data scientist at Heach, which is a ride-hailing startup in Paris, kind of like a French Lyft. And yeah, it's super interesting to hear everyone's got the same issues. So yeah, we're data scientists split between different product squads, and some things are easy, like version controlled code review for pull requests into Looker, for example, but for pieces of analysis or dashboards, which I guess, aren't so easy to put into code review. We're also trying to put in a process for ensuring some sort of consistency and some checks on the conclusions that people are getting.
I also work at Indigo under Josh, and I run the data enablement function. So we work to connect our end users with the data resources at Indigo and communicate out relevant data news as well. And I'm here just to hopefully learn something new and be able to apply it to our function. So thank you.
I'm Ainsley. I work under Aaliyah at Indigo as a data enablement analyst, mostly focusing on analytic training, helping out Levi in that, and a lot of communication documentation around data at Indigo. And similarly, I'm happy to just be here and learn.
Hi everyone, it's the first time I'm here, and I'm Sebastian. I'm a data engineer with a software engineering background. I work at Masterplan, which is e-learning platform. We're currently in a phase where we would like to improve a lot of processes that we do, and I'm really curious about what you guys would like to talk about, and what are your thoughts about the analytics stack?
I'm Andrew. I'm an analytics engineer at Fishtown Analytics. I always trip up enunciating all the syllables in that. But most of so we work a lot with getting people up to speed with DBT, getting DBT implemented, and like that's already moving people a step closer to like the software engineering path from analytics. But like I'm super curious now. Like recently I've been like, it's super common to find people like in DBT use code review and get the Git flow, but when they go into like Looker and all of the other BI tools, they completely forget that process. So like, and like what the lines are between like, you should probably style this better, but they just need to rush and get the answer out to like a manager. Like how much is styling? I don't know.
Hi, I'm Akshay. I also work at Indigo Ag. There's a fair number of us here today. I am a BI platform engineer, I guess is my job title. So I mostly focus in writing code in Looker and then developing SQL as well. So code review is something that we do, and the people who I work with most closely, we're in charge of all of the code review for all of the Looker repos across the entire organization. So we handle a lot of code review for many different kinds of people, and a big thing that we deal with that Levi has helped with immensely is kind of helping to make sure that the other analysts across the organization are writing more standard code so that we don't have to keep teaching everyone the exact same thing over and over again through PRs.
I can go next. Hi everyone. I'm also with Josh's team. As Akshay mentioned, I'm an Indigo BI engineer. We do lots of Looker development, lots of code reviews, and yeah, I think it's very similar issues that you guys are all having. So just wanting to learn more about it.
Like an Indigo team offsite or something.
Sorry, my camera's not working, but my name's Steve, and I run analytics at a fitness startup platform called Obey Fitness, and currently just a data team of one. So wondering if there are any tips I can use to kind of peer review myself, or even some ad hoc things that we can ask the tech team to peer review, but kind of looking to learn some tips to help implement when kind of build out a data team ourselves. So yeah, looking forward to chatting with all of you.
So on this topic, in my own thinking, I have loosely segmented it into like 4 different pieces. We can maybe take some time to talk about all of them, or whatever people are most interested in, we can dig into that the most. The 4 things are, what is the goal of a peer review? Like, is it specifically like making sure that like SQL queries are all the same? Is it like adhering to business logic? Is it stylistic things? The second segment would be like, where does the review happen? Like, is it something, like, I guess I mean that both in terms of like temporally, where does that happen? Like in the process of writing up an analysis, but also like, is it something that happens in GitHub? Is it like you have a Slack channel where you tag other people who you think might be able to offer you a valuable perspective on what you're working on, that sort of thing. Tooling as well. Like, do you want to use like a collab notebook where you can do inline commenting? And then I guess the biggest other piece is accountability, which is just how do you get people to adhere to a peer review process? It's like with a code review, if you review a PR and your site goes down or your product goes down, it's pretty easy to understand the consequences of not doing a good review or not doing a thorough review. But like, what's the consequence for analytics? So that was basically, what is the goal? What specifically is being reviewed? Where does review happen? And how do you ensure accountability? So for what is the goal? For my team that I manage, having a goal in peer review, a lot of it is like making sure that people don't miss much in terms of business logic or consistency, or like there's just a part of the product maybe that would be relevant to an analysis that someone's not thinking of. That's pretty relevant for us because we have a 15-year-old product that is full of lots of hidden features. But I'm curious to hear, like, for other people, like, what is your primary goal in having a peer review process?
I think a lot of it is knowledge sharing. When I think of my team, just given everybody works quite independently, and especially now when everybody's working from home, I think there's definitely value in having a second set of eyes on things in terms of a sense check and making sure that logic is sound, but then also just to kind of have a means of sharing what we are all working on amongst each other to learn from.
Yeah, that is really huge, knowledge sharing. Like, it seems like there's kind of a consensus in some ways in the industry of moving towards having people embedded deeply with a business partner, which is good for understanding that particular area, but maybe not for sharing like techniques or even just like relevant information about your product across your analytics function. So that is definitely a really important thing to think about.
I'll take a pass for answering for my team, but I'm sure people are going to elaborate on it. But I mean, part of it too is just consistency. I mean, we're trying to create a self-service platform available to the rest of the business, and a lot of it's enabling the individuals that are deeply embedded in those groups. So just the start, it's the making sure things are consistent and kind of up to par. There's also like a side effect is actually the knowledge sharing and understanding what, you know, other groups are looking at and how they're looking at it so that we can help connect those teams. And then I'd also say there's just the dissemination of like best practices as well. Since there is such a huge training component, it helps us identify kind of where training is needed or different groups we might be able to support in different ways.
Yeah, what I think that the larger your organization becomes, the more important it becomes to formalize the process of like pull requests and everything like that. I know that we're pretty big now. We've got a lot of people developing in the Looker platform, a lot of people using it. And, you know, we're finding just today we're having issues with, we try to limit access to, well, I don't know how familiar, I'm sure most people are kind of familiar with Looker, but Looker allows you to limit who can like change dashboards or, you know, like add a new one or delete one or whatever. And we've had problems with people kind of either accidentally or for whatever reason, just messing up other people's dashboards. And so what we've done is we've locked down access, the ability to access those different different publicly available folders. But then what people have done is that the few people that do have access will start giving their friends access, and then that just kind of spreads, and before you know it, too many people have access and things are getting messed up and we have to like lock it down again. So I realize there is a lot of friction that's caused by this process, but I think the bigger you get, the more you know, unfortunately, the more kind of locked down things need to become, just because there's bound to be one rogue person that's going to do something wrong.
Right. That is an interesting tension between like having things be self-serve, but also enforcing quality. I feel like that theme emerges in so many different like data practices in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think it's a constant issue for us. And I think unfortunately we do need to just kind of be tough sometimes and just say, no, you can't push your changes, you know, right away without, I know it's important. I know you have a meeting that you need to present for, but we really need to plan for these things and make sure that we keep the platform in good shape.
How's that gone? Like when you've pushed back and said, I know you've got that meeting, but you really need to plan better.
You know, I think we have some friction sometimes, but I think it's kind of necessary. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what other people at Indigo think about that.
It's all about the yes and giving them the
right.
Like, yeah, we're going to deny your PR, but this is how we're going to solve it with you.
Right. Give them a way to work towards the yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think it is often really helpful to compare it against the engineering organization. Like, no one gets the feature they asked for today. That's not how engineering works, because engineering is trying to build a platform that doesn't break. And so are we. And so you don't get to build a thing and make it available immediately. Like there are hoops to jump through, and we do it to ensure quality, not to block you, not to slow you down. We do, you know, if you've got as many resources as you can for your development mode and like whatever, you can work as best you can without peer review, but it's not going out into the world until we feel good about it.
Right. But we also have to contend with people just throwing up their hands and saying, forget it, I'll just make a Google Data Studio dashboard or Excel visualization or something like that too, you know, so you can't push too hard.
Right. Yeah, that kind of speaks to the need for like visualization as like a custom thing that your team offers. This is something that we've been talking about internally on my team and in our data science org in general, is like, how do we differentiate stuff that comes from our team from like a random product manager made a mode dashboard and took a screenshot of it. Like, we don't want our work to look the same because we want it to be different and more authoritative.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, it's not like we don't really enforce a color scheme or anything like that.
Sure, yeah.
We're more concerned about just, you know, our data is pretty complex, and if you write the SQL wrong, your results aren't correct, and that's our biggest worry.
Right. Yeah, I guess that speaks to the need on my second point, like specifying like what is the thing being reviewed in your peer review process. Like, it sounds like there's definitely a lot of like reviewing queries or reviewing like the queries that generate like some actual aggregate table that is like the blessed aggregate table. But I'm curious, are folks mostly using peer review for more code-ish things like writing SQL queries, or is it also for like actual write-ups themselves?
So for us, we're still pretty early in this, but yeah, I mean, we have both, right? So if you're making a dashboard, for example, you need to check the SQL that goes into it. You need to check any additional calculations in Looker or however you do them that go into the dashboard. But then there's the other level, which is like, does this dashboard make sense? Does it read well? You know, if a user is trying to use this dashboard to see an issue with a feature, are they going to be able to spot it straight away, or are they going to have to dig? Is there any ambiguity? So there are kind of like two levels, and I have been thinking like maybe we should separate them out, like be more explicit about what we're doing with each review. Do we say, okay, now we're doing a review which is really just on the code, and now we're doing more of like a design critique almost for a dashboard or like a presentation for the analysis. So yeah, kind of in between there. Yeah, be interesting to hear how everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nathan, because I see the same thing. So we have like Thetaform, where we do kind of all of our data modeling and writing queries, and there's a review. Well, we don't have a review process for that, but I feel like there should be. So there's that side, which is more like black and white. Your query runs or it doesn't, it's accurate or it isn't. It's not as black and white as I would like it to be, but it's never black and white. So anyway, there's that piece, and then the kind of more ad hoc, like one-off projects where you just want someone to have a look at something and see if it makes sense, if this visualization is easy to interpret, things like that. So yeah, there's kind of like a less defined set of criteria, I suppose, that you would use to evaluate something like that. So yeah, maybe it does make sense to kind of split them out into two.
Yeah, that's what I feel, and also it's quite a different, like emotionally, to argue about the code is a lot less emotional. Usually it's quite objective, unless you're into like different style guys and things. But when it comes to the dashboard, there's a lot of subjectivity, and it kind of needs a different approach, because everything can become a lot more contentious when you're saying like which type of graph you're using, or the way you've formatted your axes, or whatever it is. It can seem quite pedantic, and you have to be careful not to like end up in that place where you're just like saying, oh, I don't like this, I want you to change it, because that's not really helping anything, and it's quite different. Yeah, there's a really great talk I saw a couple of years ago on code review that kind of plots different issues on an axis of was it like how contentious it is and how emotional it can get. So like where it's more objective or more subjective, and then like the value of the different the things that you're raising, and being mindful of like when you're raising something that's low value but is going to be really emotive versus high value and less emotive, and trying to strike a balance. I'll see if I can find the link and share it.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a really helpful way to think about it. It's something that I found particularly working remotely has been hard, because like code review remotely is easy. It's asynchronous, whatever. You send me your PR, I look at it, I give you comments. I don't hurt your feelings. Everybody feels good. But you sent me an analysis or a dashboard, and I say, I don't really like how you did this. It's not wrong. The data on there is correct, but I think you could do it better. And that's the kind of thing that's sort of much more difficult to keep feeling good for everybody when you're remote, and when you're not just, stopping by a desk to be like, hey, let's look at this together and like talk about why you did it and everything else.
Yeah, honestly, I find it kind of hard in person too sometimes, because it can be so easy to go down a rabbit hole of like, oh, well, you shouldn't use a bar chart for this type of thing. Like this indicates certain like assumptions about the data. If you choose to use this style of visualization, it can be so easy to get off track and off the point.
That's fair.
Something that I have found works well with code reviews that maybe would work well for more like design crit type things. Something we do for our ETL repo is we just have a checklist for every PR where it's like, have you consulted a subject matter expert? Have you actually tried to run this query? Just a bunch of stuff like that that you'd think you wouldn't need a checklist for, but actually making it explicit, like just laying out the steps for everyone, actually really reduces the cognitive load and helps them keep the goal in mind. I don't know, I bet something like that would be pretty helpful for more of the subjective elements, more of the art parts of data analysis than the science parts.
That's a great idea. I think I'll take that. Yeah, checklists on PRs are great. Like even for me, like I always forget these little things, and if I have to check a box to like promise that I did it, makes such a difference every time. So yeah, that's a really good idea for the more art side. And I guess like you can make that checklist, like if you get everyone on board with what that checklist should be, and there's like a team understanding of why we have this checklist and what it's for, like that's a really good idea. I think I'll take that.
Nathan, taking it a step further, I mean, Alan on our team did a great job. We actually have, or Alan and Akshay did a great job. We have a template that's like baked in. So anytime someone goes to even submit a PR, that checklist is kind of upfront, or there are certain things we ask for from the person submitting the PR, but the reviewers also have effectively a handbook to follow of stylistic things, as well as making sure the SQL runs. Well, that's automated now. Thank you, Akshay.
That sounds really good. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, on the topic of like reducing the cognitive load, have y'all found any like good SQL linters, like automatic, like you put in a linter in GitHub and it was like checks like, oh, your stuff isn't capitalized, you're doing this, because that's kind of like one of our biggest. It's something that's really useful for new people to get used to like the style and kind of fit that form. But like, and then once you get rolling, it's becomes just like a part of our process.
Yeah, I am one of many in our team that have constantly like joined the team and like, we should build a linter. This should be pretty straightforward. And we've learned the hard way too many times over that linters are actually pretty difficult to build. That said, if I'm not mistaken, we probably have a public repo out on GitHub that tried to do it. We definitely didn't go far. We keep hearing people in the community saying they volunteer and they're going to make it at some point. I'm pretty sure they run into the same walls. So what we did instead, and Kaitlin linked the PR template we like link out to a style guide that we have. Like it's just a markdown file with a sample query and force you to check that. So it's like, it's really manual, unfortunately, but like that's the closest we've gotten to like, and hopefully someone in your team is strong enough to champion and say, we've seen this with some of our clients where they go in and say, hey, your SQL didn't match the style guide. I can't approve this. And so for simple things like that, it works, but like it also depends on like self-enforcement, like reinforcement.
Yeah, our habits are like, if you're not in style, we request review or changes requested, and it's like caps.
How does that normally go over? I'm curious. Because that seems like something that it would be emotional and not objective.
We try to be like with a sense of humor about it. Like we know it's a standard and we know it's annoying, but it's annoying on purpose kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, we kind of just gave up on styling SQL all the same. Because as long as it was like readable generally, it didn't matter. Because like I know Ellen, for example, does not like capitalizing like the select, and I love that. And it's like, as long as it's readable and like the indentation is like reasonable to look at, and you didn't just write it in one long line, like it doesn't really matter to us after that. It's more of the like making sure that everything else is running first rather than worrying about like what the SQL may or may not, like how pretty it is. And like if you want to fix it, go ahead and fix it.
Right, comments.
Yeah, comments are the most important thing that we look for. Right. Like
I think as a policy, how I train people is I say that you can develop your own style, but it has to be neat and it has to be consistent and there has to be comments. But I think it's kind of hard to convince a bunch of analysts that they should write SQL differently, because a lot of people have been doing it for a long time, and you learn it a certain way, and it's kind of difficult to read SQL formatted in a way that you're not used to. I've done a lot of consulting. I've never been in a position where people like try to enforce a certain style, and I don't know. I'm very interested, Zachary, that you do that and you feel like it works, because I've never really seen that work. I feel like
for how many people contribute to your code base? I feel like that's probably a factor of whether that works, because I've definitely we've got like 20 some contributors to our ETL repo at this point, and like I've definitely come across queries like when I've had to like fix something that's broken and holding up all reporting, and it's just formatted in a way that it's like, oh man, I just don't. This is so hard to read.
Yeah, so like I've been on the team. It's like when I started, it was like 2.5 people. Now we're at 8. It's still relatively small where we can like have this enforcement, and like honestly, it's like the peer review process and the style is like very charismatic leadership. If like someone went away, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't happen anymore.
Interesting.
I was gonna say a quick win to help this. Like usually it's a pain in the ass because it's like I have to change this from like all caps to no caps or caps to all caps or no caps to all caps. A very underutilized feature in GitHub, if you happen to be in GitHub, and I hope everyone is, because Bitbucket's been a pain recently, is the suggested changes feature in GitHub peer reviews. So when you write a comment on a line, you can hit that like nice square, and you can just write it out for them, and they can hit one button that says, yeah, commit this change instead. So it's like less painful for them because like, yeah, it's super shallow-ish, but it's nice to look at. And so if you have the time, go ahead and change it because you're probably writing the comment already to be like, hey, change this to all caps. Might as well just go in and change it for them and they can hit a bunch of buttons that commit it.
I have a question regarding the pull reviews. Since we are planning to like start using Git soon, I'm curious if you folks are enforcing a review. Like, is it possible to like merge the pull request without a confirmation or like without a approval? So are you suggesting people to use it, or are you enforcing it so it's not possible to merge without a confirmation? And like also like if you're enforcing it, what happens like if you make a change like after an approval? Like do they need to go another round of approval? Like how strict are you in general?
From my experience, if it's not enforced, people won't bother because it's faster for them not to. And in our case, we have it set up so if you make an additional change post-review on a PR, you have to get it reapproved, unless the change is just merging to get updated with the production branch, in which case that's okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because like sometimes it's just a one-liner change. It's super small and that could have a huge impact, or it could just be like a stylistic thing. It's so hard to know, and it's so hard to know if it's going to get out of hand of just like, oh, I got changed one small thing. Ah, crap, I broke it. Let me just do one more small change. Ah, crap, it's still not working. Just like doing that like 5 times. I don't know. Like it's in general, probably there should be some rule of thumb, I would say, about like how big of a change is this. But even then, like it's kind of subjective if it's a big change or not.
Yeah, going back to Levi's comment about like as your org gets bigger, sometimes you just gotta set a rule. I mean, most people probably wouldn't take advantage of it, but we had a few that absolutely took advantage of it, and
right.
And then we needed to just make it a rule.
Yeah, we're a small team within a small company that's like implementing a stack from scratch, and we generally, because we're working so fast at the very beginning, we generally don't require approval. It's just like everybody's working on their thing, deploy your stuff, make sure it works, it's good, and then at some point we lock it down and require approval once we kind of have the bones. But it does get really onerous in the beginning, especially for reviewers. There's just an insane quantity of review happening. But once you get to a more stable code base, it feels a little better. And I've done that twice actually, and it has worked pretty well because generally the people who are doing the build out are very close to it and very careful, and you're also early enough in the process that if you break things, there aren't a lot of users yet. Right. So the downside is low, but as you actually try to create something as a source of truth, and you're actually using it and it is production.
Was your team familiar with the GitHub workflow and like writing ETLs in general?
No, not in either case. And so it was kind of a learning curve for them in terms of tools and just the Git flow.
Okay, because I'm sure there will be a huge pushback if I try to enforce it at the beginning, and it will be also like super hard to like review everything. It's good to know that you started without enforcing it and it worked well.
In that case, I would definitely recommend like doing some kind of training or having like a tutorial or documentation or something of like, this is just how this works. We've definitely experienced that as well, where we onboard a new person who like they've mostly just been a pure analyst and they've never written ETL before. And then suddenly when they have to do that, they're like, oh my God, like why? This is so stressful. Like just having like a nice, I mean, we keep going back to checklists, but having like a process laid out for people makes it seem so much more tractable.
One thing we haven't really touched on that is worth mentioning too is your analyst manager. Like a lot of times if an analyst is the one complaining about the peer review and he, complains right to that individual complains to their manager. Like these are conversations as a manager you've got to have with them ahead of time to make sure that they understand why this process is important. Because if you don't have buy-in with the managers, then you're not going to get it with the analyst in a lot of cases, or it could be difficult, especially if you're presenting a hurdle for getting things out the door.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We're kind of moving in this direction, but another topic worth discussing with peer review is where and when does it happen? It seems like we're all kind of talking a lot about GitHub in terms of the wheres, but when is an interesting question with analytics, because like you never know. Like, is this going to be just a one-off thing in a dashboard? Is this something that's going to become a source of truth? Is it a one-off thing that I put into a dashboard that suddenly someone is treating as a source of truth? I'm curious how you all think about that.
I was thinking of it in a slightly different way, actually. So one thing that we're currently exploring is like, at what point in the process should you get a peer review? So, I mean, I've done like the maximum, which is before you start working and you've got some idea of what you're going to do, just have like a quick, relatively informal one, just to make sure that you're on the right track, that you've got like, you understand the business logic and all the kind of things that could come up and potentially save you a lot of time down the line. Sorry, there's a huge thunderstorm here, so if it's, yeah. And then you've got the peer review at the end, which is more like, now that you've done that thing that you were planning to do, is it good quality? Is it meeting our standards and all those kind of things? So that was another question that I had, was like, at what point in the process do you consider doing a design review or like a spec review, or are you just thinking about when everything's done?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's certainly a problem that we run into sometimes, is that someone goes and does a whole bunch of work on their PR, and it turns out they're breaking all these best practices and nothing's right, and then they submit their PR and they're, and then we come back and just have to kind of tear it apart, which is really frustrating, both for the people looking to get the review and for the person doing the review. And so I think what I try to do is, with people that are newer, is we say, like, just don't just start working on your PR and then just lay it on us without any warning. Let's talk it through and get figure out what your plan is, and we can recommend certain best practices to make sure that the PR approval process is smoother. And then hopefully for your people who are, more experienced, they'll know what you're looking for, and they don't have to come and talk to you before working on something, because they'll kind of better understand what you're looking for.
Do you have like a best practice in terms of complexity of the query? Because it's like, is it like, oh, if it has however many subqueries, or if it's based on raw events, or if it's like 400 lines, like how do you decide what is like a fair thing to surprise someone with?
I don't know. That's a really good question. It's a constant battle. I think that there's definitely people writing some pretty sloppy queries. I don't know. I think I'm curious to hear what Akshay or Ellen or Josh has to say about that.
I was gonna leave it to one of you guys, but I mean, it's hard to set like you could write a 3-line SQL statement that's just an absolute disaster. Well, hopefully not, but versus, I mean, we've had 10,000 line PRs dropped on us without much warning. So it really depends. But I mean, through our hope through having an enablement program and the training is really to partner with people before this drops. So like we try and just be proactive about communicating, like we want to partner with you on this before it occurs. And I think we saw a lot more of these big, complex, hairy PRs coming through, and we're doing a pretty good job getting ahead of them. But again, we just had one come through that I know Akshay is not happy with. So
like it just doesn't follow the best practice and clearly like wasn't designed well. So gotta rethink it.
I was gonna say maybe. Oh, sorry. Actually, go ahead.
I don't think I don't have a specific number or exact like metric that I look for, which I think is the worst thing I could say. Like it's all like a heuristic to me. Like I look at a PR and I say, okay, like this does or does not seem reasonable, and these are the reasons that I do or do not think it's good, which isn't helpful for anyone here. But that's just, you're not alone if you're doing the same thing.
I was gonna say we tend to bucket our reviews in like, we will request changes if something like doesn't work right, and we would approve but leave comments. So it's like in posterity, our comments about your style are there, like it's running, and we're gonna, like we tell you even in the comment, like you should write an issue and solve this in the future. If it's like a really big style problem, but it runs, so like whatever, go ahead. And you kind of put the ball in their park. And like if someone goes back and is like, why was this query so terrible? You can like point at this PR and be like, yeah, we told them to fix it and they never did. But on a tangent, I think like in the whole training people up and like not scaring you with a crazy PR, like one practice I saw in software engineering that maybe we can borrow is some teams like to open PRs the second the branch is created. So like, and maybe like for more beginner members of the team, you pair them with more experienced members early on. You don't really have to pair code, but as long as you keep the PR open and like assign it to the person, like as they're developing, you can kind of see how code is passively, and maybe just label it as a draft PR so you know it's not meant to be reviewed. And like you pop in one day and see that, wait, this is terribly wrong, but they're only at like 20 lines. You can kind of put the brakes on it before things go crazy. I don't know. But I've seen some software engineering teams do this. It just gets a bit crazy because there's usually a ton of open PRs that get kind of hard, and you need to play with labels to keep things clean.
Yeah, that does actually get at the final segment of the whole peer review process that I was thinking about, at least, which is accountability. In that case, like you've got a senior person who's taking some accountability for making sure that the junior person feels prepared. That seems like generally a pretty good model because it helps more senior people also just develop leadership experience and get opportunities to provide mentorship for their more junior teammates. But like intrinsic motivation isn't always necessarily the best form of accountability. What other ways are people thinking about accountability for the quality of their code?
Can I bucket that question, Katie, with another question of like, how do you decide who runs reviews? Because like we've found that an issue recently where like one person gets bombarded with reviews because he's like the champion for quality and style. But when something falls under his radar, like everything just breaks.
Yeah, we have a bit of that too. We have people who are like the de facto warehouse owners who have like seven different PRs at all times. One thing that I've seen work with that, at least in software contexts, is people will just say like, hey, I don't have time for this. You need to find someone else. Like they'll have like specific periods of time blocked off on their calendars to do code reviews. And if they have too much to fit in that, they gracefully duck out and make explicit the fact that they don't have time to do it.
The one thing that's helpful is like for those people who are the best at reviewing and who are considered like the best people, have them like put their ideas down in like documentation somewhere and like have them make a handbook. That's what we did. And then we circulated that handbook to all of the analysts around the company. So now they know what we expect from them in what we're looking for in a PR. And then the other part is that like we have code owners for all of our repos, and it happens to be that our team handles all the review for the rest of the company. But for an organization where like anyone can approve and review code, just potentially randomly assigning it in GitHub could work, as long as all of the reviewers are following the handbook and are reviewing it consistently. But like, I know, for example, one of my teammates, Brian, he's much better at catching typos than I am. And like, if a comment has a typo in it, like 99% of the time, I'm not going to catch him. He always will. So like those kinds of things, you can't really, there's no software or like process you can implement that's going to fix something like that. That's just like, I'm not as good with typos as he is.
Right, but Code Owners is a really good way of making explicit, like, who's the subject matter expert for this, whether it's like a particular area of your business or just the warehouse in general. Like, you have one person who's the default reviewer, or one person who's like your default reviewer for some particular like sales product or something. Maybe I should, on the subject of accountability, what are some horror stories of non-accountability that you've all encountered?
That's a good way to get the conversation going again, for sure. I think for us, our biggest problem was not, well, I don't know. I'm sure that there are stories of like bad data making their way into important meetings and things like that. But just the platform getting super big and messy, that was the biggest problem for us, and that we've been working very hard to get it into good shape again. And I think that's what's really convinced us that having this formalized process is absolutely necessary, especially as we grow. It becomes more and more necessary, and it's really easy for things to get out of hand, just in terms of size and complexity and messiness and everything.
Gotcha. Is that like complexity in terms of like managing the dependencies between a bunch of different DAGs or something, or just the actual queries themselves?
That could be part of it. But actually, I think that what we're seeing with Looker is people using Looker like Excel, in that you kind of go straight to the database, write a query, pull some data, and then make one explore out of that, and then make a dashboard out of that, and then call it done. And what we want to do is we want to be strategic in how we design our explores, and make sure that we don't have duplicate, like that we're not making duplicate explores, that the explores that we do make are, generally usable for a whole lot of different things, rather than just answering one question. And when you do that, then you can like reduce the size of what you're publishing to people.
Yeah, and then that like almost leads to another problem of discoverability. Like, once you have that centralized, like, canonical thing, people have to be able to find it, which is a whole different can of worms, to be sure.
Ainsley and Aaliyah and Levi and our team do a really great job of putting out like release notes, I think every other week or every week, that have kind of like what's in flight and what's been completed for explorers, dashboards, that kind of stuff. And that's how we've gotten the word out to everyone else.
How do you do that? Is that like an email, like a Slack post or something?
We create like a Confluence page and then Slack it out to everybody bi-weekly.
Nice.
So I can add one thing about the documentation, because recently we had also a problem with documenting a change log, but also sharing it with other team. So one place where we would like to add such change log would be our documentation. It was first Nuclino, now it's Slab. But second, we also did this change log automatically in our repository, which was not available to whole company. So Slab has a really nice feature to automatically pull and sync the readmes that are in the repository to your documentation tool. And that works really nice so far. So we have something that is automatically created, or engineers can create some change log here is about some schema change. And then it is automatically pulled and copied to our documentation tool that can be presented to other teams.
That sounds pretty slick. That was okay. Thank you very much for linking that. There's been so many good links shared in here. We should probably repost those in the actual Slack channel.
One question can I ask you regarding the peer review? We're really in the early stage of developing our best practices, and we're a really young team and small team. So we don't really have these problems that you mentioned today yet. But when it comes to checking each other's SQL queries, so you always run the queries and check whether they work, because this is also a discussion that sometimes pops up in engineering. Some people don't check whether the code runs, because this is a person that developed the code kind of responsible for. We just check whether the code applies to our style codes, whether it looks good. And this is often a question whether you actually run this code or you just read it and whether it looks good.
We adopted what most software teams do, which is have a CI tool that will run tests for us. So that takes the onus of making sure that the code runs out from the reviewer. So now we are just focused on whether it fits the guidelines that we have set out, not if it runs or not, because we have the tool that checks to see if everything runs.
For that, is it actually running it against a real database? Because
so
your query could run but not return any results.
So, okay, yeah, so that's a good point. So we use a tool called Spectacles that runs API calls against our Looker instance. So you're right. If the query doesn't return anything, that's not something that it can check. But assuming that it does return things, it's going to check everything else. What is that?
And it's designed to not return any data for security too.
Yeah. So it's not checking the actual data that's being returned, just that the code actually does run.
So if
the query itself is bad, then that's another issue.
Yeah, if you're interested in that, a quick shout out that there's going to be a Spectacles meetup in like 3 weeks. So
nice.
Stay tuned. We require screenshots of the code having been run as part of the PR. So that's in the checklist. Like, validate that this worked. I don't want to have to go get into your branch and actually run it, but show me that you got results and that they're reasonable and logical and what you expected them to be, which is really helpful. Or for DBT, show us that it ran and that all your tests passed. So that tends to be pretty effective in at least forcing people to take that step of running it.
Yeah, you can link completed query runs in BigQuery, which is one of our main tools, which is our version of it. Very nice.
Yeah, I know with Thetaform as well, you can integrate it with GitHub and then create like a GitHub action. And then within the YAML file, you can specify that the code has to have run in Thetaform. So I don't know what other tools that would work with, but I'm sure it's possible.
Sweet. Well, we're about at time. So I want to thank everyone for coming out and talking. I feel like we've really actually gotten at a lot of different stuff and been able to share a lot of best practices. I definitely know that I have learned some stuff that I need to look into today. I'm also kind of interested. I feel like we didn't really get to talk at all about like dashboard or like design crit style reviews. So maybe we can do something like that as a future session for this. But other than that, thank you all for coming out.